Anissa. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another one of our webinars on covering the market and how to do market research. Today, the topic is an important one related to COVID-19 and some of the fraud issues that we've seen. So today, it'll just be me. Usually I'm accompanied by others, and Yanisa, please chime in along the way. So you have just me today. So I'll go over the topic and the agenda in a second, but just to start off, I'm Raj Sharma, in case you don't know if we've never met. I'm the CEO and founder of Public Spend Forum and leading the development of GovShop. I have been in the public procurement space for too long, almost 20 years, and COVID-19 specifically, has obviously raised a lot of challenges for all of us. In the context of some of the work we're doing, COVID-19 has become a big focus area in terms of the supplier coverage that we do. So if you know Public Spend Forum and GovShop, we provide market intelligence and supplier intelligence. And as part of that work, we've been pulled in both by the Defense Joint Task Force, as well as some of the work we're doing with the National Governors Association, and now with a number of other organizations such as the American Hospitals Association, et cetera, into really providing broad coverage of suppliers that are providing equipment, supplies, services in support of addressing COVID-19. And as part of that, GovShop is now also being used as really a central place where a lot of suppliers are registering. So we have a lot of people being directed by the main government site on the defense, by the Defense Department. They're being directed here to register. We have a similar process on the state side. So let me just jump in. I see there's a number of people that have joined so far, and sure a number of people will be streaming in. So just to start off, let me just say that, we like to make this a conversation, and the best you can make a conversation out of a webinar. So please feel free to post any questions along the way here. This is meant to be 30 minutes, so it's going to fly by really quick. But please post any questions along the way. And Yanisa, please feel free to interrupt me if needed. I try to keep an eye on the questions, but so we'll stop along the way to see if anybody has any specific questions, etc. So, okay, why don't we go ahead and jump in? So the agenda, I'm just going to take 2 minutes to first just talk about the categories and areas that we're covering, because I think it's important to the topic itself. Then we'll spend most of the time on just discussing some of the fraud issues that we've been seeing, and we've also been notified of by all the different partners that we're working with, as well as some briefings that we've received directly from the State Department, by FBI, by the Department of Homeland Security. So we'll spend a little bit of time on that, and then just talk about the process of what does verified or vetted suppliers mean. And so if you're out there right now buying in this market, right, and you have needs, and everyone does, what are some things you can do to ensure that you're avoiding some of the issues that we all are seeing right now? Okay, so with that, when I go ahead and jump into the first agenda item here. So first of all, COVID-19 coverage. So we're covering, so as I mentioned, this is a rolling list here that we have up. So we're covering a number of areas related to COVID. Everybody's obviously knows about PPE. That's in the news every day, and something that we've all been hearing about. So we definitely have PPE and a huge coverage there. And that covers everything from respirators and masks, which are in short supply, especially the N95 masks, but also other areas that are in high demand and short supply, like isolation gowns. That third bucket you see, or second bigger bucket you see here, medical gowns, aprons, caps, the glasses and goggles, face shields is another big one, and then gloves. So that's PPE. But in addition to that, ventilators. It's not as huge a demand, but unfortunately with some of the spikes we're seeing right now, it's starting to become more. But luckily, there's a little bit more distribution of ventilators going on. So hopefully it doesn't become a big issue again. But of course, that was a critical issue right at the beginning of this pandemic, where we had critical shortages. So we've covered a number of things in here, everything from actually ventilators, but also some of the component parts that were in short supply, like endotracheal tubes, the ventilator circuits and filters, which were really hard to come by, but then also some alternative equipment like manual resuscitators. I'll go over to, just keep going left here. Then we have vaccines, therapeutics, and testing. Testing is the big one in here. Just because, again, reopening the economy, everyone needs testing both for, there are two types of tests, COVID-19 tests to detect whether someone has COVID, or the actual antibody tests, which is to detect if you've had, or if someone had COVID. So there's a lot of coverage here because there's a lot of things that are happening here. FDA, almost on a daily basis, issuing some type of emergency use authorization. So we're trying to keep up with that and update that on a regular basis. And then finally, all the way on the right side is cleaning and disinfectant products and services. That's also, of course, everybody needs that, right? So there's been definitely huge demand, and also an uptick, luckily, in supply as well, where you've had, so you're talking about disinfecting equipment, then about the cleaning wipes, sanitizers, etc. And these are all, many of them have EPA certificates with them. But then also there are services we're starting to cover. It's not noted here. But everyone needs a lot of disinfectant services where they're bringing people into offices and any facility, right, to disinfect on a regular basis. So that's also a high demand right now. You see on the bottom here something unique, alternate care facilities. That's actually, so we're adding some other unique categories. You'll see this list growing. We're adding more and more categories as we go. And so alternate care facilities is one of them, where, to expand beyond hospital capacity. Again, we're seeing this right now in some states where hospital capacity, ICU capacity, and number of beds is at capacity right now. So, the need to build alternate care facilities, that's what we've listed some companies that have already done that. And again, this list is expanding on a daily basis. I'll pause here for a second. Yanisa, first of all, am I coming through okay? I should have asked that early on.
Nope, it sounds good.
Let me just flash up a screen, and then we'll talk about fraud issues. So let me just flash up this screen where you can find this entire list on GovShop. If you just go to govshop.com and just click on this. We've made it very easy to access right now just because everybody's looking for that information. So we put it right up on the home page. So if you just click this, this is obviously GovShop is our marketing supplier intelligence website that has over 1.9 million companies on here, but we've created a special section and landing page for just COVID. So this is the COVID landing page. All the categories that I was just mentioning, they're right here. So you can click down and click on any one of these to go deeper, and you'll see all the suppliers that are linked to these. We also have contract vehicles on here. So some of the contract vehicles that have already been approved. And then right now we have 3,000 plus suppliers with that list. Again, with a lot of people coming in and registering on a daily basis, as well as our own research teams and machine algorithms. Everything together is leading to a lot more data here. I just want to show you really quick. If we scroll all the way down, and we'll go to the topic at hand. These are just opportunities, but let me just go down here. So this is where you see verified. So this is a logo that we're using right now, PSF verified, to signify companies that have been vetted through a comprehensive process, taking into account a number of the fraud issues. So let me just pause here for a second, and I'm going to go to the slide deck. There's really not that many slides. I'm just going to put up this slide and just talk to this slide for a few minutes. Let me just pause here, see any questions or anything so far. I'm not seeing anything yet. Okay.
No questions, but I am sharing some relevant links to some content in the chat, so be sure to check that out as well.
Okay, great. Thanks, Shanitza. So, this is a very simple, 3 bullet points here, but each one you could talk about for a very long time. And there's actually a 4th one that I failed to note over here, which is related to kind of more like phishing schemes and financial fraud. So let's start with middlemen in the supply chain. So there are 3, so first of all, let's just say there are 4 major areas. There's just the issue of not just, so we've characterized as middlemen, but there's also, just new suppliers and how do you verify them as a number of new supply sources come online. Second is fraudulent documentation. That's been an issue. And then actual fraudulent or bad products. So what's happening there? And then 4th I mentioned is more financial and kind of cyber type issues like phishing schemes, etc. So if I go back to the top, middlemen in the supply chain, we already know that there's been a number of course, because of the demand supply constraint, right? A lot more demand than supply. We've had to take our supply up enormously. So we need more suppliers. So that's great, right? So it's not a bad thing for new suppliers to come in because we honestly, with the existing capacity we have in the supply chain, existing companies could not supply what we need, right? So we need new companies, both manufacturing product as well as distributing and all the distribution logistics around that, which is quite complex. So one of the biggest issues that's come up, and we see this on a daily basis, is people register and we're sent suppliers by the National Governors Association and other states to vet, is that there's a lot of distributors and brokers and dealers coming into this and individual consultants. So that's not necessarily, again, a bad thing. So I just want to caveat that. Because there are a lot of really good people doing good work. And so you want to, the goal here is to separate those good people, right, in terms of the ones that have the expertise and can provide value versus ones that may not be able to. So that's the main issue that we're trying to address here. The key issues that we've looked at when we're getting suppliers, one is, from a middleman standpoint is, what process do they have to secure supply, right? So if it's a distributor, how are they going? Which manufacturers are they going out to? How do they vet products, right? So do they have actually any expertise? And how are they vetting products themselves? So if they go out to China, for instance, and sign up some deals quickly with some companies, to get KN95 masks. Do they actually have expertise? What is their own process for making sure the product that they're getting is actually good product, right? And has the right certifications, et cetera. The other thing we look at is, do they actually have, what kind of relationships, et cetera, do they have? How do they ensure that they will get the supplies? There's been a number of articles you've probably seen and news stories about an agency paid a lot of money, in a couple of cases, tens of millions, in one case in over $100 million, and deposited a check, but the supply never came. And it's because there wasn't a good relationship on the other side, and where, the product was either stuck in China, or, it went to, the manufacturer decided to provide it to some other company where maybe they have a better relationship, right? So there's been a number of those cases. So it's really important to understand, from any kind of distributor coming in, or any consultant, or anybody that says, hey, we can get you supply really quickly, what, do they have the expertise, right? Maybe they've never done PPE, and we have found this. There are actually people that maybe never did PPE before, but they still actually have the understanding of the manufacturers and the supply manufacturing base, for instance, and they know how to negotiate, and they are sophisticated in that. So they are still very legitimate. So, right. So it doesn't mean that if they're new, they can't do this. It's just, you have to make sure that the expertise is there, the relationships are there, and how are they securing supply? Because that's been one of the biggest issues. We just had an issue. Wonse, who's somebody within Department of Defense, emailed us about a supplier where it was related to disinfectants, and where a payment was made, but the supply never came. And it took a month, but they finally got their money back. And the supplier basically said they had issues and they had, I don't have the exact words, but they thought it would be easier to get the supply that was required, and it was in very, very large quantities. So I'll pause there for a second. Yunisa, do we have anything? I'm just looking here in the chat. Okay. I like to look on screen to see if I know any of the people on on here right now. I don't believe so at the moment. I might not be looking at all the names as I scroll through them. So that was our first issue. Let me just keep going unless there are any other questions. Please feel free to kind of type in a question if you have one. Fraudulent documentation, number 2. So the fraudulent documentation is, again, you can imagine it's one of the key things is related to the certificates, product certifications. So we, in working with others, we've learned how to look at some of these documents. But basically, what you have are fraudulent certificates that are being put out there, and they look and feel almost exactly the same. And then the key thing that you want to be able to do in terms of product certification. So many of the products, when we look at, if I go back to GovShop for a second, sorry, there's a certification tab there. If I go to browse and filter here, there's a certification filter, I believe, here on the left side, if I can see it. But many of the filters or products require certification, either FDA certification, CDC, EPA for disinfectants. So there are lists, and we're noting these products and whether they have certification or not. I'm sorry, I'm not able to get to it right now, so let's just go back here for a second. That's really important. Now things like non-surgical gloves and non-medical gloves, et cetera, or masks, they don't require certification, but certain products do require it. So it's really important to, one, make sure that the products you're getting are certified, and 2, the vetting process. Again, this is where we hope not everybody has to repeat the process, and this is why we've been asked by the federal government in many cases, and also by states and NGA, the National Governance Association, to create more of this central repository so everybody doesn't have to go out and do this. And National or the American Hospitals Association is also providing us their vetted suppliers, so we know that they've been vetted by them, for instance. So that's 2. I see there are a couple, some question might have popped up here. Let me just see. So I'll come back to that question around, it's asking information technologies and government contracts. I believe so. Whether government is looking related to COVID-19, there are some requirements out there. Happy to chat further if I can, and I'll try to get back to that in a second. In terms of fraudulent or bad products, that's really, in some cases, so are the products actually meeting the specification requirements, right? Now, you need testing facilities to actually be able to figure that out, right? In most cases, for instance, disinfectants, whether it actually works or not, or if you're talking about KN95 masks. So the best way to look at, again, to avoid the issues are to look at certified products, right, that are on lists, right? Or go to a established distributor that is, again, doing their own vetting, right, of products themselves, because some of the bigger and more established distributors, et cetera, will also actually have their own, because their own reputation is on the line. They are vetting the products and testing the products themselves before they bring them all online. And the third thing I'll mention related to that is that products is the FDA's, for instance, FDA just took about, I forget the exact number, I believe it was 40, 50 companies, Chinese companies, manufacturers, and took their products offline. They had given them certification and they took it off. And so it's important to keep up to date. Again, this is one of the things we're trying to do from a centralized source standpoint is we check this information daily, and we also get notifications from all these different agencies. So we're able to update that information. So if you just check here, you should be able to see whether something has been, something's still certified or not. And the last thing I was going to mention is the financial fraud. One of the things with people working at home, et cetera, that we're seeing is, there's a lot of just the typical phishing schemes, et cetera, that you see in other areas, but they're being applied here. People finding out, for instance, through their homework, who a company you might have a relationship with, and then posing as a representative of that company, and even sending out an email with that domain on it, and basically starting a process for potentially securing an order. So there's a number of those things. We'll send a link. Eunice, I'll chat over a link, this FBI article that actually lists out a number of these things. We don't have time to get into that in detail, but I would encourage to look at that. We actually had a speaker from the FBI who spoke to that and provided some more detail on it. So these are some of the issues that we're seeing. If you have any other ones that you want to chime in and tell us about, please do. And so what we're doing then to avoid and address kind of fraud and manage the risk there, what we're doing, like I said, is, we have several thousand companies. Now, this is just one part of the list. It says, our process, one thing we're doing is you'll see this PSF verified badge on supplier profiles. That means they've gone through our process, which I will tell you about in a second. So I'll just take 2 minutes to tell you about that. And then two, we're also getting vetted suppliers, like I mentioned, with other very well-established organizations that we're working with, like the American Hospitals Association. So they've done work in this area for a long time. So we're working with partner organizations that are providing some of that information to us as well. So in terms of how you verify, it looks like there's a raised hand. Let me see. Was there a question?
I'm going to follow up with that attendee to see if they have a question.
Okay, great. So let me just quickly tell you about the process we're using for verification. One is, like we said, we look at the company level. Is this a reputable company? So we have a whole checklist for our team. We have dozens of analysts that are working on this. So we look at, at a company level, One is the company in good standing. Are there any exclusions, things like that? We check against multiple sources to ensure that, the company is in good standing. Second thing we look at is at the product level, we'll look at the company and see if, they've been in business supplying this for a long time, right? So have they done, for instance, PPE or disinfectants? Do they have actually customers specifically that they can provide us information on, right? So do they have paid orders, right? So well-established companies, it's not as difficult, right? Because you can see that right off the bat. Where our process kicks into really more intense scrutiny is if we see that it's a new company, that it's coming in first time and most recently just providing, they just became a distributor of PPE, then again, that's not a bad thing because we verified a number of companies that have done that. But what we want to know in those cases is, can you actually tell us about how you're vetting and getting this product? Two, we want to know about your customers. Do you have any existing customers, government, hospitals, and we'd like to see invoices, et cetera. And then in some cases, we're also talking to the customers. So that's the process. And as you can imagine, it's a lot of work. And so, we've been asked by a number of states, et cetera. We just spoke to North Carolina as well. And they're looking at maybe having us just vet all the suppliers that they're getting. So not everybody has to repeat this work over and over again. So I'll pause there. I know we're almost at time and see what questions we have. So now the question around information technologies and government contracts, what I would encourage is going to the, I believe the USA spending site. If you can see my screen here, at least on the federal government level. And then there's a couple of other sites you can go for. You can go here and you can see what kind of spending is going on in terms of, this contract visualization in IT and other categories. We've actually put out some analysis. So Yunisa, if you, if we maybe post this webinar, we can send out an email. I think there's that analysis that Sensi also did with some of the other spending categories, et cetera. So we can send that, maybe a link to that out. So there is IT spending. I'm sorry, I'm not completely kind of right this moment, kind of have all the details of where that spending is, but what we know, we've definitely seen that in support of COVID-19, for instance, right? There are a lot of agencies trying to upgrade their infrastructure around working from home and working remotely, right? That's a big requirement, and not everybody has the infrastructure. Second is around learning, right? People are looking for learning solutions, web conferencing, or learning solutions online. So those are just two examples of where technology is also playing a role, but there's a number of other ones as well. Anything else right now? I know, Yunisa, you mentioned there was a hand up.
Yeah, I didn't see the question come in, but please, if you have any questions, please ask them now, and you can always email us separately and we can reach back out as needed as well.
Great. Well, thank you so much, everyone. We encourage you to check out this data on govshop.com and also let others know. And also just reach out to us, if there are any companies you're specifically wondering about, because we may actually have more data on those companies than you see. So we're happy to answer any questions for you as well. Well, we wanted to make this fairly quick just to get this information out. So thank you again, and look forward to hearing from you.
Thanks all.
Thank you.